poison. It can be diluted or altered to become something beneficial, or it can just straight up kill you. And in the world of Pokémon, there are plenty of examples of those looking to help or hurt with their toxins, to Pokémon using their poison to help soothe those around them, to other Pokémon using their poisons to harming plant life, as well as people and other Pokémon. Today we're going to be taking a thorough look at the poison typing, to see where these toxic critters fall on the morality spectrum. I'm Kyle with Pokebinge, and this is Poison-type Pokémon Good to Evil. Now before we start, just a couple ground rules. We'll be judging these Pokémon by the characteristics of the species as a whole, meaning we won't be looking at any individual instances of the Pokémon in question. An exception can be made for some legendary Pokémon, but this will mostly be on a case-by-case basis. Also, if an entire Pokémon evolutionary line shares the poison type, they'll be sharing one spot. With all that out of the way, let's get started. As usual, we'll be starting with the most noble Pokémon and working our way down to the most evil. These poison types keep their toxins from causing harm to those around them, and actually use them to help others. These Pokémon are the Good. Sprouting up to claim the gold medal of Good, we have the first Pokémon starter line in the entire series, the Seed Pokémon, the Venusaur line. Unlike their fellow, more aggressive first-gen starters such as the Charizard line, the Venusaur line seems to be a fairly laid-back trio of Pokémon. Where both Bulbasaur and Ivysaur are concerned, they both seem mainly focused on getting sunlight and nutrients to the plant growing on their back. However, when it comes to their interactions with their fellow Pokémon and people, they are relatively calm, only really engaging in battle when provoked. When Ivysaur finally evolves into Venusaur, this Pokémon gains the ability to use the spores that grow on the flower on its back to soothe and calm down irritated people and Pokémon. Sure, Venusaur isn't exactly the speediest of Pokémon, so getting to those who would benefit from these calming spores might be difficult from time to time. But seeing as how this evolutionary family gets along well with their fellow Pokémon, and helps calm down those around them, the Venusaur line's placement is well deserved. Another first-gen, 3-stage evolutionary line is getting our silver medal of Good, the Drill Pokémon, the Nidoqueen line. And being a multi-leveled evolutionary line isn't all that the Nidoqueen line shares with our previous entry. Like the Venusaur line being a lot more mellow than their fellow starters, when it comes to Nidoqueen, Nidorina, and Nidoran female, all three are much more docile and calmer than the males of the Nidoran line. When it comes to looking out for each other, Nidoqueen does switch from being her usual peaceful self though, and in more than one Pokédex entry, it says she will defend her children with her life. And while the prospect of death and leaving the younger Nidoran and Nidorina without a maternal figure is incredibly dark and sad, the fact that Nidoqueen has that level of love and parental instinct speaks volumes for what an amazing poison-type Pokémon she is. The only reason we're not awarding the Nidoqueen line our gold medal of Good is because the Pokédex entries only mention that they really only protect each other, rather than looking out for other Pokémon as well. But we really can't fault the Nidoqueen line all that much, plus the fact they all share a calm demeanor lends them the silver medal. Next, we have our first regional variant taking home our bronze medal of Good, the poison gas Pokémon, Galerian Wheezing. Now granted, as Galerian Wheezing has not been around as long as our previous entries, not much is known about the Pokémon compared to the others. What we do know is that Galerian Wheezing's behavior makes the region a much healthier place to live in. In Sword's Pokédex entry, it mentions that due to the number of pollutants in the air, Galerian Wheezing consumes them and replaces it with clean air. And while Galerian Wheezing do follow Trubbish from time to time, this is due to the fact that Trubbish and Garradour tend to have quite a lot of toxins being produced by their bodies, and Galerian Wheezing try to prevent the toxins from spreading too much. Here's to hoping that this Pokémon is able to find other regions to live in, and continue its amazing and valued skills helping out other Pokémon and people. Our second regional variant is coming up next, only this time they're coming from sunny Alola. It's the sludge Pokémon, the Alolan Mukline. Rather than their usual forms of having a scent so awful that it tends to drive others away, as well as their touch causing plant life to die instantly, both Alolan Grimer and Muk are fairly popular on the island. Grimer and Muk were originally brought to the island region to help out with getting rid of the trash that the residents of Alola have thrown out. But rather than be annoyed as being used as essentially mobile garbage disposals, Grimer and Muk seem to truly enjoy their assigned jobs and usually have a pretty cheerful and calm demeanor. If they run out of trash to eat, however, these two Pokemon can cause some damage, breaking stuff in order to create more trash for them to enjoy. It seems like this would be a pretty rare occurrence though, so we can't hold the occasional bad habit against Alolan, Grimer, or Muk too badly. Our first Pokemon line from the Paldea region is up next. The very goofy fish Pokemon, the Clodsire line. Due to losing a territorial battle, the Wooper of Paldea have abandoned their normal habitat of swimming in the water and instead are found walking around the grasslands of the region, with a poisonous film covering their skin to protect themselves. But rather than going off on their own, the Wooper of Paldea form tight-knit groups and watch out for each other. After Wooper evolves into Clodsire, they help the younger Wooper and even allow them to ride on their backs. We don't know too much else about them, but we're pretty comfortable placing this line of Pokemon here. Our artistic Pokemon line, the toxic monkey Pokemon, the Grafili line, is up next. Both Shroodle and Gafii are a pair of Pokemon who use the poisonous saliva both for defensive purposes, as well as to mark their territory. Shroodle seems to have a mainly calm disposition, but if one is bitten by them, a side effect of their poison is paralysis. But that's mainly just done to their enemies and as a defensive technique. With Grafii, we really don't know all that much about the effects of their toxic saliva, except they use it to draw pictures on trees in order to mark their territory, and that it can change color due to their diet. Next we have the toxic mouth Pokemon, the Toxicroak line. Both Croagunk and Toxicroak are among the rare types of poison Pokemon whose toxins can be diluted and turned into medicine. And while we don't know how much these Pokemon are willing participants in having their venom collected for this purpose, the fact that they are popular enough amongst medical facilities to use as their mascots does kind of indicate that these poisonous frog Pokemon are willingly helping out. When it comes to battling other Pokemon, both of them can fight dirty from time to time, but this is done more of a survival tactic more than anything else. We don't want to get in the way of our next Pokemon when they're ready to attack with their smelly spray. The skunk Pokemon, the Skuntank line. When we get right down to it, Stunky and Skuntank are, well, skunks and display the typical behavior of the real-life animals they're based on. What does separate Stunky and Skuntank for their real-life counterparts, however, is the fact that the fluids these two can spray can either knock someone out cold or cause memory loss, and we really don't know how long these effects last. Not too far under their Alolan relatives, we have the mainline versions of the sludge Pokemon, the Mukline. Unlike the Grimers and Muks found in the Sunny Island region, the mainline variants of the two are not utilized by the public to take care of the garbage of the area. However, that's not to say that these two don't help out. Both Muk and Grimer still enjoy a delicious meal of garbage and do help in getting rid of the trash in any given area, even if they aren't asked to. But what brings the mainline versions of Grimer and Muk below their Alolan counterparts are their attitudes. Rather than being quiet and cheerful, Muk and Grimer typically have a kind of vacant expression and really don't seem to care about helping anyone out. Plus, it is an unfortunate side effect of the Muk line that any plant life their bodies touch will die instantly. It's not like the Grimer and Muk are going out of their way to cause harm, however, and even if their help in getting rid of garbage is unintentional, we still think that the mainline sludge Pokemon family deserves a good ranking. Our first legendary, as well as Ultra Beast, is taking the next spot, the poison pin Pokemon, the Naganadel line. Poipole, the pre-evolved form of Naganadel, is pretty unique, even where legendary Pokemon are concerned, as they're so admired in their home world that many people have them as their starter Pokemon. And while they can display some not great behavior, such as cackling when they spray their opponents with their venom, Poipole seem to have a pretty deep bond with their fellow Pokemon and trainers. When Poipole evolves into Naganadel, they seem to mature quite a bit, as they no longer laugh at their opponents suffering during battle. They are pretty fierce fighters though, and can cause some heavy damage if they aren't careful. Sure, both Naganadel and Poipole have some behavioral issues to work on, but with their popularity and the bonds they form with others, their ranking is well earned. And rounding out our good section, we're giving it to the Fang snake Pokemon, Seviper. Having a long-standing hatred of someone isn't great, but that is unfortunately where Seviper finds themselves, as they have a long-standing rivalry with Zangoose. Nearly all of Seviper Seviper's Pokedex entries make mention that Seviper and Zangoose have a mutual hatred of each other, to the point that both have scars from their encounters. So why is Seviper avoiding getting a lower ranking? Well, Seviper's Pokedex entries make no mention of it having issues with any other Pokemon, and in the case of its rivalry with Zangoose, it also mentions that it is a generations-long feud, so it is just following its nature. And with that entry wrapped up, we now arrive at the neutral territory. These Poison-type Pokemon land in the gray area. First off in this category, we have Galerian Slowking. Unfortunately, like other Pokemon from Galar, we don't have too much to go on for Galerian Slowking. From the Pokedex entries though, we know that the poison from Shelter's bite has really affected this Pokemon's behavior. Rather than vastly increasing Slowking's knowledge, now Shelter's bite has given Slowking the ability to use the toxins from what they eat in order to create strange potions. And we aren't sure if these potions are the kind that we use on our Pokemon after they battle, in order to heal their injuries or something more sinister. So with that uncertainty in mind, we have to place Galerian Slowking here. Coming in next, we have to go to the ocean for our first water-dwelling poison type, the mock kelp Pokemon, the Dragalge line. When it comes to Skrelp and Dragalge, these seahorse look-alike Pokemon are often found living in the wrecks of sunken ships, often avoiding both people and most other Pokemon. Actually, the Dragalge line might be a contributing factor for why there are boats that find a watery grave, as a few of both Skrelp and Dragalge's Pokedex entries mention that the poison from these Pokemon can eat through the hull of ships, and causing that kind of damage isn't great. But the Pokedex doesn't say that they're actively trying to make sure that the ships don't make it to their destinations, so we're inclined to think that this is just the nature of these Pokemon. That, coupled with the fact that the Dragalge line actually has a very close relationship with their fellow ocean-dwelling Pokemon, Delmise. Sure, they kind of rely on Delmise for additional housing and shelter, more than anything else, but seeing as the relationship with their fellow Pokemon is a pretty healthy one, we leave them on the higher end of our gray section. You'd better hope not to run across our next Pokemon if you're allergic to insect stings, because it's time to talk about the poison bee-type Pokemon, the Beedrill line. A lot of Beedrill's Pokedex entries mention that if this Pokemon runs across any intruders of its territory, they will sting the enemy relentlessly. So why do we rank it so high in this section? Well, when it comes to Weedle, they mainly just use the poisonous horn on top of their head to fend off their predators, mainly flying Pokemon such as Pidgey and Sparrow. With Kakuna, they don't really have much to speak of, as their behavior literally is just that of a regular cocoon. Like we said, after Kakuna finally evolves, Beedrill is a pretty fierce Pokemon and doesn't really let up when it comes to stinging their enemies. But it also mentions that this only happens when Beedrill's territory is invaded, and as a beehive, it's a pretty hard thing to not recognize when one sees it. So getting on Beedrill's bad side should be a pretty easy thing to avoid. Plus, Beedrill does seem to care about the Weedle and Kakuna under their care. Moving on to the Swalot line. When it comes to Gulpin and Swalot, these Pokemon are occasionally viewed as pests by some due to their habit of munching down on anything they come across. And we do mean anything, with Swalot's stomach acid being strong enough to dissolve stuff that it should not be able to, like car tires. Outside their ferocious appetites though, there isn't really much to be said. Eating random stuff that might not belong to you isn't great, but if munching on replaceable items is the worst this Pokemon family does, we can't rank them any lower. Our second water-based poisonous Pokemon is next, the balloon Pokemon, Quillfish. With an abundance of water types in the Pokemon universe, Quillfish is probably among the more unfortunate that lives under the sea. Due to their round body types, Quillfish are not really the best swimmers, often having the currents of the water carry them from place to place, with Quillfish pretty much helpless to fight their random changes of locations. That said, when it comes to attacking and defending themselves, Quillfish is able to drink nearly 3 gallons of water in order to inflate their bodies and fire off their toxic spikes at other Pokemon. And that's really all we know about them. The final Slowpoke evolution from Galar is taking our next spot, the Hermit Crab Pokemon, Galerian Slowbro. Unlike Galarian Slowking, when it comes to Galarian Slowbro, we can't really give this Pokemon any benefit of the doubt. Like their counterparts, Galarian Slowbro seem to have a perpetually vacant expression and don't seem to really take in their surroundings. But with Shelter now latching onto their arms rather than than the tails of the Kanto Slowbro. The Galerian Slowbro is kind of careless when it comes to attacking, as they pull on Shelter's tongue in order to shoot highly potent poison from Shelter's tip, and doesn't seem to take into account any of the effects their attacks might cause outside of battle. Though with that said, Galerian Slowbro does seem to be a pretty peaceful Pokemon. Next is the ore Pokemon, the Glamora line. Both Glimmet and Glamora have petals made of crystallized poison attached to their bodies. Rather than being a fancy and dangerous accessory, however, the petals are more of a defensive maneuver, as Glimmet and Glamora shake them to spread clouds of toxic particles if they're attacked. Glamora's petals in particular are said to look like the Terra Jewels found throughout the Paldea region. Another Gen 1 Pokemon takes the next spot on our list. We have the Poison Moth, the Venomoth line, as they are a duo of bug/poison Pokemon. Both Venonat and Venomoth are often found in forests and heavily wooded areas, and even though these Pokemon are not as likely to come across people due to their living environment, Venonat and Venomoth can still cause quite a bit of trouble. A number of Pokedex entries mention that these Pokemon often hunt and eat their fellow bug-type Pokemon, but a Pokemon does have to eat after all, so we can't really fault them for that. What isn't as easily overlooked though is the fact that Venomoth's poison can have long lingering nerve damage and can sometimes end in permanent paralysis. The Pokeball lookalikes, the mushroom Pokemon, the Amoonguss line, comes in next. Foongus and Amoonguss have a very unique and very silly strategy when it comes to dealing with those who cross their path. With their mushroom caps resembling the standard Pokeball, these Pokemon are hoping that anyone will either try to pick them up before releasing their poisonous spores and attacking. Unlike other Pokemon who disguise themselves much better, it is obvious that these two are trying to trick others, and as such, their plan fails 9 times out of 10. Keep in mind though, they do want to cause damage to others, even if it is in retaliation. Moving on to another Gen 1 original variant Pokemon, we have the Poison Gas Pokemon, the Wheezing line. Before adjusting to the environment of the Galar region and helping purify the air, wheezing and coughing just used to be a pair of poisonous gas-filled Pokemon. More alarmingly, where coughing is concerned, it is said that these Pokemon are prone to explode due to the volatile nature of the gases being held in their bodies, and we doubt that coughing would willingly blow up because, that would also hurt themselves as well. We still feel like caution around this Pokemon is a must. With wheezing, thankfully they don't seem to be as prone to go boom as their previous forms, but a lot of Pokedex entries mention that they are just the mutation of 2 coughings fused together. It's unclear if that doubles the potency of the possibly explosive gases in their bodies, and they're just better at controlling them. But apart from the possibility of being floating time bombs, both coughing and wheezing seem to be pretty okay Pokemon as long as nothing sets them off. Now coming in from Alola and rounding out our gray area, we have the toxic lizard Pokemon, the Salazzle line. In the world of Pokemon, where unique evolutions are pretty much the norm, the Salazzle line is no different. For these toxic lizards, only the female Salandit are able to get enough to eat in order to use their energy to evolve to Salazzle. And after they eventually do evolve, the Salazzle have a reverse harem with the unevolved Salandit and actually have competitions with other Salazzle in order to find out who has the most Salandit serving them. But we're unsure exactly how much of Salandit's free will remains, as a number of Salazzle's Pokedex entries mentions their pheromones, attracting them and deeply affecting them. And with that entry wrapped up, we now arrive at the poison Pokemon whose actions do more than make us feel slightly sick. From causing some pretty serious harm to others to actually killing them, these poison-type Pokemon are the bad and the evil. Our second to last Pokemon line from the Hisui region is starting out this category. The free climb Pokemon, the Sneezler line. Thankfully, the Hisui and Sneasel's hunting habits seem to be relatively tamer than the Johto counterparts, with there being no mention of them attacking bird Pokemon's nests for the eggs or finishing Pokemon off in a brutal fashion. But thanks to the poison that is now coating their claws, Hisui and Sneasel uses this venom to infiltrate their victims' nerves. With Sneasler, we really don't have any info on how this Pokemon finds their food, but Sneasler do prefer to live by themselves in high mountain regions and do help out people on occasion. Moving on to the other poison moth Pokemon, Dustox. Okay, sure, Dustox does share a lot of similarities with the other poison bug Pokemon, so why did we place Dustox lower than the Venomoth line? Well, unlike Venonat and Venomoth, Dustox is said to be a pest, often invading parks and orchards and eating the leaves and fruits off the plants. Plus, rather than simply sticking to the forest, Dustox loves any and all sources of artificial light and will gather in large numbers under streetlights, as well as campfires. And while that is annoying, if they are attacked, Dustox releases clouds of toxic scales so powerful that they could make anyone violently sick. And as their gathering point of choice is somewhere that more than likely would have a good amount of people and other Pokemon living nearby, the damage Dustox could cause is something that is pretty staggering. Swimming in from the Hisui region, we have the pin cluster Pokemon, the Overquill line. In Hisui, both Hisui and Quillfish and Overquill are often regarded as pests by a majority of those who either fish or just journey across the sea, often using their poison to taint the water around them, making the habitat unlivable for other Pokemon other than themselves. Overquill in particular seems to have a pretty aggressive attitude, with them even getting the nickname the Sea Fiend due to their violent temperature and attacking anyone they encounter with the many spikes covering their bodies, as well as their poison. What keeps the Overquill line from falling any lower is the fact that both Hisui and Quillfish and Overquill are only located in certain areas of the Hisui region, so whom they do affect isn't as large a number as some other Pokemon in our lower sections. Time to take a trip back to the sea for our next evolutionary line, the jellyfish Pokemon, the Tentacruel line, as Tentacruel and Tentacruel have been around since the very first games in the Pokemon series. These jellyfish have had quite a number of appearances. Actually, in some games, the argument could be made that Tentacruel is the most common encountered water-dwelling Pokemon. That said, due to their large numbers, both Tentacruel and Tentacruel can pose problems both to other Pokemon and people. They use their many tentacles to catch their prey and sting them relentlessly, which is pretty brutal, but it also just seems like the way that they hunt. Though because they do seem to be more of a serious problem than the Overquill line, we're placing Tentacruel and Tentacruel slightly lower. Moving on, we have the final Pokemon line from the Paldea region, the Revavroom line. While Varoom seems to be a mostly peaceful Pokemon, with a common belief in the Paldea region being an unknown poison Pokemon inhabiting an abandoned engine to make it their home and mostly sticking to caves to absorb the nutrients from the rocks for energy. The same cannot be said for Revavroom. After Varoom evolves into the much larger Revavroom, they have the unfortunate habit of threatening others with the loud noises of their exhaust. And if that was all, we would be placing Revavroom higher in our ranking. But in addition to startling others with their loud noises, Revavroom also spews toxic fluid from its mouth, covering anything and everyone they encounter. The saying that beauty is only skin deep is applicable to our next Pokemon line, the Bouquet Pokemon, the Roserade line. In this 3-stage evolution, Budew is by far the most decent of the three, often seen as a Pokemon whose mannerisms inform others about the changes in the seasons. After Budew evolves into Rosalia, their behavior stays roughly the same, with Rosalia only becoming aggressive if someone attempts to pick the flowers that grow by its arms. But as with others in the category, it is the final stage of the Bouquet Pokemon's evolution that lands them in the bad territory. After Rosalia reaches the conditions to evolve into Roserade, their peaceful behavior goes out the window. Roserade may have flowers growing from her arms like Rosalia, but that is the only somewhat positive thing that can be said about this Pokemon. It loves to inflict damage, either spewing a pretty powerful poison at whoever they choose, or else whipping them viciously with the thorny tendrils and taking delight in the harm caused. Far below the female counterparts, we arrive at the other drill Pokemon, the Nidoking line. So you may be asking, exactly why are we placing the Nidoking family in this category? Well, unlike the much more peaceful and close-knit Nidoqueen family, the Nidoking line are a trio of much more aggressive Pokemon. Both Nidoran male and Nidorino often charge at others in order to stab them with the horns on their heads before they inject them with poison. And after Nidoran finally evolves into Nidoking, their behavior really doesn't improve, as they can cause quite a bit of collateral damage while battling, and don't really seem to care about whatever damage they do cause. And that isn't the only difference that the Nidoking line has from the female counterparts, as they're not a close family of Pokemon whatsoever, seeming to prefer solitude during their lives. Dancing into the next spot, we have the rock music enthusiast, the punk Pokemon, Pokemon, the Toxtricity line. Before Toxel evolves, this Pokemon seems to have a pretty mellow and kind disposition. After the evolution takes place though, that changes. And while Pokemon's nature is changing due to evolution is a pretty common thing to happen, in both low-key and amped forms, Toxtricity has some pretty major behavioral issues to work out. While they are in their amped form, Toxtricity is said to be pretty aggressive and short-tempered, and while their low-key form does not seem to be aggro all the time, Toxtricity are still pretty arrogant and look down on those they view as weaker than themselves. And when it comes to their Gigantamax forms, Toxtricity is said to just go berserk and on a rampage due to their own poison, now affecting their own brains. Swooping down to claim the next spot, we have the bat Pokemon, the Crobat line. Like others on this list, the Crobat line has a very specific habitat to live in. For instance, if you go into any cave, you're pretty much guaranteed to encounter a Zubat. And while these eyeless bats more or less just fly around whatever cave they call their home, using echolocation to navigate their living space, when they eventually evolve both into Golbat and Crobat, they develop a pretty healthy appetite. Unfortunately, what Golbat and Crobat love to feed on is the blood of other Pokemon and people. Golbat probably has the most disturbing feeding habits of the trio, with them drinking as much as 10 ounces of blood from their victims and being so full that they are unable to fly. Crobat seem to have learned to control how much blood they drink. At least we hope they have, as we can't find anything that mentions how much they do drink. But where Crobat is concerned, they are pretty stealthy about their approach and really doesn't seem to care who their targets are. We get to our second to last Alolan Pokemon next, the brutal star Pokemon, the Toxipex line. In this list, we have covered poison Pokemon whose poison can cause nerve damage and far worse. But trust us, getting poison from the Toxipex line on someone else would probably be one of the worst experiences someone could deal with. If Marini happens to attack with their poison, it's said to inflict a numbing sting, followed by an itch so intense that the urge to claw at your skin is impossible to resist. And while we can't find something as unpleasant sounding for Toxipex, their poison can affect something as large as a Wailord and last up to 3 days. Plus, for both Pokemon, their food of choice is Corsola, leading to the near extinction of that Pokemon in the Alola region. While going into a jungle might be a unique and fun experience, you should keep an eye out for our next entrant, the Flycatcher Pokemon, the Victreebel line. Where the Victreebel line is concerned, a majority of their Pokedex entries mention their hunting habits. The only thing that Bellsprout, Weepinbell, and Victreebel seem to have in common is the sweet sticky liquid they produce from their mouths in order to attract their prey. Unlike some of the other Pokemon lower on this list, Victreebel isn't the most aggressive hunter, preferring to lure whatever unfortunate Pokemon that wanders into their paths before either attacking them with their razor-sharp leaves, or simply having them go into their mouths before dissolving them, bones and all, with their strong stomach acid. Calling others trash is never okay, but in the case of our next pair of Pokemon, that is their actual Pokedex title. It's time to talk about the trash heap Pokemon, the Garradour line. Trubbish and Garradour are a duo of Pokemon often found around unsanitary conditions. But unlike other Pokemon on our list, such as Galerian Wheezing and Alolan Muck, who help clean up the environment, the Garradour line seems to do whatever they can to pollute wherever they make their home. And while that is really bad, the gases and poison that both Trubbish and Garradour produce are even worse, as there are multiple entries that mention that they are not only harmful but life-threatening. And while most of them do mention that whoever is infected with the poison has to be in a weakened state before the possibility of death, that doesn't make it any more okay. And like with Toxtricity, Garradour's Gigantamax form has really dark implications connected with it, as it's said whatever poison gas that they can produce can seep into the bones of their victims. The desert is where our next Pokemon makes their home. Next we have the Drapion line. Both Skorupi and Drapion are two Pokemon that could seriously use an anger management class. If either is encountered, they will attack most people in Pokemon, using both their claws and their poison to inflict damage. Drapion's reputation is so well known that it has been given the nickname the Sand Demon. Skorupi doesn't seem to be as vicious as their evolved forms, but they're still known for gripping their prey relentlessly with their claws before before injecting them with their poison. And while these Pokemon do have kind of a vicious nature about them, they also seem to be kind of cowards, as if they're confronted by Pokemon such as Hippowdon. They choose to keep a low profile, hinting at the idea that they both like to attack weaker Pokemon than themselves. Flowers are beautiful, but for our next trio of Pokemon, we advise you to avoid smelling these flower Pokemon's petals. This entry, we're talking about the Vileplume line. Where Oddish is concerned in this Pokemon line, by all accounts, they seem to be a fairly decent Pokemon, mainly keeping to themselves and burrowing deep into the dirt during the night to receive additional nutrients, as well as using the tactic as a way of avoiding potential predators. Like others in this category though, after Oddish evolves, they pick up some less than great traits. Granted, with Gloom, the main distinctive feature about them is the absolute foul-smelling liquid that drips from their mouths, with the scent being able to reach the noses of those more than a mile away. And while we pity anyone who catches a whiff of this gross scent, Gloom seems to fall under the fairly decent banter with Oddish. But Vileplume is the culprit of why the flower Pokemon line is getting placed this low. Vileplume are known for not only causing extremely violent allergies due to the pollen they produce with the large petals on top of their head, they also use the pollen to paralyze their potential prey before devouring it. We would give Vileplume a higher ranking if all they did was cause some sneezing and coughing with their pollen, but devouring helpless prey while it's still alive after paralyzing them, that is pretty grim stuff. Slithering into our next spot, we have the Cobra Pokemon, the Arbok line. Unlike our other snake Pokemon on this list, the Arbok line truly enjoys the fact that they scare a majority of their fellow Pokemon. Ekans often spook bird Pokemon such as Pidgey away from their nests in order to eat whatever eggs are there. And while they do use their stealthy nature in order to also capture prey, we don't know how often Ekans uses either tactic. When Ekans evolves, their behavior becomes much more aggressive. Rather than just targeting small prey, Arbok uses the patterns on their hoods to frighten others into shock before using their bodies to coil around them. If someone is lucky enough to avoid being wrapped up in Arbok's coils, however, they are said to chase their intended victim relentlessly until they capture them. Next, we have the Ariados line. Everybody has to eat, and Pokemon are no different, but when it comes to Spinarak and Ariados, a majority of the Pokedex entries for these two covers just how they hunt. And while they seem content just capturing the unwary Pokemon that gets entangled in their webs, Ariados has a much more sinister tactic that it uses at times. Rather than playing the waiting game, it uses the silk they produce to attach to a wandering Pokemon, and then follows their prey's trail to their homes before not only making a meal out of one Pokemon, but also whatever friends or family that are living with them, which you have to admit is incredibly ruthless. Our final bug/poison combo Pokemon is just barely getting ranked outside of our bottom three. We're talking about the Scolipede line. Venipede, Whirlipede, and Scolipede are a trio of Pokemon who are some of the most aggressive poison-type Pokemon out there. Venipede also seems to have one of the more humorous Pokedex entries though, as their Shield Pokedex entry says that Venipede attacks any Pokemon without any thought on how the fight might turn out. And while some more thought should definitely be put into Venipede's actions before they act, their aggressiveness does not mellow out when they evolve into Whirlipede. While other middle-stage bug-type Pokemon are content to wait in their cocoons until they reach their final stages, Whirlipede uses their wheel-like bodies to speed at and ram those around it at speeds as high as 60 miles per hour. And while Whirlipede isn't particularly big, getting hit at that speed by anything is going to cause some pretty heavy damage. Scolipede ramps up the aggression even more though, as after Whirlipede evolves, Scolipede picks up the nasty habits of using their pincers to grab others by the throat before slamming them repeatedly into the ground, while injecting them with poison. And it's not like this is Scolipede's way of battling. As it's said, they don't let their victims go until they stop moving. Our second and final Ultra Beast, as well as the Bronze Medal of Evil recipient, the Parasite Pokemon, Nihilego, is up next. For anyone who is familiar with the storyline from Sun and Moon, it really shouldn't come as any surprise that this Ultra Beast is among the final three entrants. Nihilego really lives up to its Pokedex title of being a parasite, latching onto and controlling anyone they come across. While having some unfortunate individual under its control, Nihilego's neurotoxin seeps into its victim's brain and deteriorates their minds. Even if someone is lucky enough to escape from Nihilego's grasp, The poison that this Ultra Beast has injected into its victims can leave them in critical condition, both mentally and physically. Our biggest Pokemon, both in size and the amount of power it controls, is taking our Silver Medal of Evil, that being the gigantic Pokemon, Eternatus. The Gigantamax phenomenon that is so popular in the Galar region is all thanks to the boundless energy that Eternatus produces with its body. Eternatus can cause the darkest day, where countless Pokemon reach their kaiju-like sizes, but without their consent or control. And with that, many Pokemon in their Gigantamax forms, it is a foregone conclusion that the Galar region would be reduced to ruins, unless the Pokemon that Eternatus was affecting were able to revert back to their original sizes. Eternatus really doesn't cause that much damage firsthand, instead just using the power this Pokemon possesses to have others cause the damage. But as Eternatus doesn't seem to care about the damage that it helps create, and essentially wipes out free will of multiple Pokemon due to its power, Eternatus definitely deserves the Silver Medal of Evil. Scaring us out of our wits and taking home the Gold Medal of Evil, we have the Shadow Pokemon, the Gengar line. Is it really any surprise that Ghastly, Haunter, and Gengar get this placement? Ghastly is by far the least dangerous of the three, being more of a prankster above anything else. And we know it's become a running theme, but when Ghastly evolves into Haunter, stuff gets much darker. Sure, Haunter still loves to play jokes on the unsuspecting target, but their pranks are much more mean-spirited. But even that isn't what really counts against Haunter. It's actually the fact that if someone is licked by Haunter, the fluid coating their tongues causes violent convulsions that won't stop until their victim is dead. And where Gengar is concerned, they often stalk their victims, taking great enjoyment from the fear and anxiety they cause. Like Haunter though, Gengar's actions take an even darker turn, as the reason for them stalking is because they're hoping to either cause great harm or murder them. In addition to Gengar's normal awful nature, in both their Mega Evolution and Gigantamax forms, they get that much more dangerous as either Gengar will see everything as a target and try to attack them, or else their mouth becomes a direct gateway to the afterlife. So if you see these poisonous ghosts, run away as fast as you can. And with our morality spectrum wrapped up, let's close out the video with our Sinner medals. We're awarding the Gluttony medal to the Swalot line. Sure, we've mentioned eating for other Pokemon on this list, but both Gulpin and Swalot are known for eating literally anything. The Lust award has to go to the Salazzle line, as the female Salazzle are easily able to get the male Salandit to do whatever they want due to their pheromones. The Wrath medal goes to the Nidoking line, as they're very reckless and can cause quite a bit of collateral damage when they're attacking. As for the Sloth medal, it's a two-way tie between both of Slowpoke's Galerian evolutions, Slowbro and Slowking, as neither one of them move very fast. The Pride award has to go to the Toxtricity line, as they do look down on those they view as being weaker than themselves. And finally, the Darwin medal has to go to the Amoonguss line, as their attempted disguises as Pokeballs are really bad. But let us know in the comments section if you agree with our ranking, and tell us who you think the most evil poison-type Pokemon is. Be sure to hit that notification bell and binge our other videos here on PokeBinge, your hub for all things Pokemon. Thanks for watching.